Okay, this has been done. So welcome once again to the short web briefing on the 100 good reasons to use geothermal energy in heating cooling networks initiative. In the next 1 hour, I will start to introduce you briefly to this initiative, give you a little bit of information about the background, the framework, how they execute it, and of course, what is also very important about data privacy and how we will respect it from our point of view. Later on, more or less the second half of this hour, my colleague Christopher Schifflechner will introduce you to the survey, explain how it can be filled out, and at the final, let's say 15 to 20 minutes we reserved for your questions and for a concluding discussion. This meeting will be recorded for those colleagues who are not able to join us today. So it will not be published, but it will be shared on request. So, yeah, I already introduced myself, so I will skip this part. And my colleague Christopher Schifflechner from TU Munich, which I briefly introduced before, he will be responsible for direct geothermal energy use in district heating networks, more or less talking about generation 2 to 4. His background is mechanical engineer, focusing on deep geothermal systems and flexible combined heat and power, and trigeneration, meaning production of heating, cooling, and power. Our other colleague who is not with us today, his name is João Figueira from the Technical University of Lisbon. He will be responsible for the low temperature heating cooling networks. So this initiative does not only address the direct use, but also heat pump supplied, local so-called fifth generation heating cooling networks. And his work focus in his PhD is on shallow geothermal. Let me just briefly explain what the cost action geothermal DHC is about. So our cost action was initiated 2019 and it's operating until October 2023 at least. Very likely it will be postponed to April 2024. COST is an European funded program which initialize research networks. So it's not a research project. So all our contributions within this network are voluntary, and COST offers funds for meetings, dissemination, traveling. Currently, our network is hosting more than 40 countries, mostly, of course, in Europe, some outside of Europe, with around 140 researchers and also members from the industry and communities. I'm the chair of this cost action together with my colleague, Professor Dejan Milenic from the University of Belgrade in Serbia. I would like to point out that a cost action network is not an exclusive club. So if you are interested to join this action, please visit our website. It is very easy to enter and it's not linked with any obligations or financial liabilities. So it is more a step in, step out network. So what are we looking at our cost action? Well, the focus is set on the integration of geothermal energy in heating cooling networks at its full technological spectrum. As you can see on the left-hand side of my presentation, there we draw the match between a different generation of district heating and cooling networks, starting at the very early stages on the first generation with hot steam heating networks and further developing towards the fifth generation of low temperature heating cooling networks. We believe that each of the available geothermal technologies may provide solutions to different generations of heating cooling networks. This is indicated here at the right-hand side of this diagram. And our idea is to identify and analyze pathways how geothermal energy could be better integrated in heating cooling networks in the future. So we have the idea of a so-called geothermal heating cooling network. You can also call it a GHC network, where geothermal plays a twofold role, not just in a conventional term that you provide heat as a source, but you also use the subsurface for underground thermal energy storage, which in our opinion becomes equally important than just providing heat in order to allow for multivalent heating cooling networks, as indicated on the right-hand side on this diagram. We are not just looking at already proven commercial solutions in this cost action. We also look at the close to market and future concept. And the same applies to this initiative. So according to recent publications, we can expect at least 350 to 400 geothermal energy systems used in heating and cooling networks. On the right-hand side, you see the overview of direct geothermal energy use in heating and cooling networks derived from the EJEC Geothermal Market Report 2021. On the left-hand side, you see a publication from the year 2019 from Buffa et al. Looking at the 5th generation. And as indicated here on the left-hand side, all these different sources with dashed lines, they are somehow linked to shallow geothermal or ambient geothermal technologies, indicating that the majority of the 5th generation heating cooling networks somehow use the subsurface as a heat source, sink, or storage. And the idea of this initiative is to combine these two different sources and collect case studies from the 5th generation to direct use across Europe and promote it to the outside world, experts and non-experts in the field of geothermal or in the field of heating and cooling networks to make this technology more visible. In the moment, there are estimates that the share of geothermal inside the heating and cooling sector as such is very low, still a niche around 2%. And if you look at the district heating cooling sector, it's more or less at the equal level. And let's say the potential for further increase is quite huge. And we are aiming to promote this idea of increasingly sharing geothermal in district heating cooling networks in our cost action. So our ambition is collecting at least 100 case studies, not this year, but during the next years. So that would mean that 25% of all previously mentioned heating cooling networks are somehow in this web tool. But while we are talking, or since these publications have been created, more and more systems are getting installed in Europe based on geothermal energy use in heating cooling networks. As I mentioned in the beginning, we have cooperation partners, the European Geothermal Energy Council, Geothermie Allianz Bayern, and the EU-funded project Quad Thermal. But we are open and are looking for further cooperation partners to increase our impact. If you are an association or you are representing geothermal sector, the heating cooling sector in your country, or you are part of a European research project, you're very much welcome to join our initiative. And you see the contact address is shown on this slide, but you can also directly contact me. And we are happy to increase our partnerships to increase the impact in the end. Being a cooperation partner is not linked to any financial obligations. It's focusing on joint communication, joint dissemination, activating different networks. So what do we want to achieve with this initiative? First of all, we want to raise awareness among stakeholders not familiar with geothermal energy use in heating and cooling networks. So we're looking at energy suppliers, district heating operators, and communities who are interested in the decarbonization of the heating and cooling sector and are looking for a solution. We would like to disseminate proven and promising solutions. So we look at the full technological scale. So if you currently have a project in your country which is under development, but might be a very innovative or promising solution in the next 2-3 years, you're also very much invited to add this project in our case study collection. We also want to look at key characteristics to better understand what are the market drivers from a technological point of view to further increase the use of geothermal energy in heating cooling networks. What do we want to have as an output in the end? So now in May, we start with a first sprint, we can call it, based on an online survey, but on the long term, we are looking at creating a web GIS tool, as shown here on this slide for the vPower map, exhibiting the geothermal energy systems in heating cooling networks across Europe. Each of these future, let's say, location will be associated with a simple fact sheet, which is relying on the survey we started right now in May. So also what is very important for data privacy reasons, we will not show specific characteristic values when it comes to sensitive operational data. We are showing ranges so people can orientate themselves, can see what are the key characteristics of each case study. This will be embedded in the geothermal DHC web portal, which is currently represented by our website, and it's steadily developed further. From autumn this year on, we expect that these case studies, which are now collected in an online form, will be transferred into so-called case study profiles. So the data owners, the owners or operators of the district heating systems, they will get access to these case study profiles, having a user profile, and they have total control of the data, including the deleting of a profile if they don't want to show it anymore. Apart from this WebGIS tool, we also want to create dissemination booklets, digital and printed ones in next year or at the end of this cost action, where we can still have access to funds from costs. And these digital and printed booklets aiming to show the spectrum once again based on selected case studies from the different generations of district heating system, from different geothermal concepts, to provide a more or less overview picture on the technical opportunities. As you will see later on in our presentation, the second half, we will also ask for a voluntary contribution of specific values. This is not binding, of course, and these specific values, for instance, peak capacities or the share of primary energy use, we will just use it for internal statistical purposes, and we will not publish any data without your written prior confirmation. So what are we looking for? So first of all, we look at geothermal energy use in heating cooling networks at the different stages, as I mentioned before, from commercial use to projects in preparation, projects in planning. It could be either direct use, it could be heat pump supplied shallow geothermal energy use. We also include combined heat and power. It could be monovalent to multivalent geothermal energy use. So if you have a system which is only supplied by geothermal energy, this is also very fine for us. We can also include heating cooling networks which are just using geothermal as underground storage, not as a source. And also we are looking at any combination of geothermal energy and heating cooling networks with balneology, meaning if you connect a thermal spa to a local heating cooling network, this is also included. What we do not want or not looking at primarily in this initiative is any single building or any single consumer supply. So if you just connect your device to a single house or a single consumer, could also be an industrial consumer, without connecting it to a heating cooling network, we are not planning to include this case study, because we really want to look at the combination heating cooling networks. The same applies to geothermal electricity production without combined heat and power. So because this is also linked to other characteristics than we are looking for. Of course, we don't look at heating cooling networks without any use of geothermal, either as a source or as underground thermal energy storage. If you're not quite sure if your case study really fits, we invite you to take a look at our offline survey form, and if you see that you can answer most of the questions with the data you have available, then you might fit into this data assessment. So how is the roadmap and the pathways towards the creation of this tool? So we start in May this year, last week, announcing and launching this initiative. We are using an online form for the first sprint, as I mentioned before, with a first collection date by the end of July, in order to allow us to get some first feedbacks, create our web tools, and present preliminary outcomes in autumn this year. In parallel, while we are doing the first sprint of data collection, the cost action is elaborating a web tool dedicated to these case studies. As I mentioned before, we will create case study profiles where those contact persons who added their information to the survey get a user access profile so they can take control and edit all the data entered in the survey. Of course, we will continue with our fact-finding mission and case study collection throughout the full year and next year, but not using this online form anymore, but using our web tool. All of you get informed in case that the data will be migrated from the digital form to the web tool. So nobody will be forgotten, and if you even if you are entering your data after 31st of July, they will not get lost. We will have a side event at the European Geothermal Congress 2022 in Berlin, together with the EU project CrowdThermal and the German network Soil to Heat, where we will have dedicated talks about the first outcomes and the promotion of this initiative. We will later on start dissemination campaigns to motivate more district heating owners, operators to participate at this survey after the European Geothermal Congress, and continue it until the end of the cost action, as I mentioned before, which will be between October 2023 and April 2024. Anyway, what we are looking for is that is a persistent tool. It should not die at the end of our cost action. So we are using Geothermal DHC to give the first, make the first move. But we will, until the end of our cost action, we will look at long-term maintenance of the system to enable a self-sustaining permanent GIS tool, which is easily accessible by data owners and doesn't require a lot of maintaining efforts. So we are hoping that, for instance, European Geothermal Energy Council will take care at the end of our cost action, but we will notify you about this in the next 1.5 years. So how could you participate on the fact-finding mission? In general, there are two different cases. The first case is you are the operator or owner of a geothermal heating cooling network. So we invite you to directly access our survey forms and use these survey forms until end of July this year or slightly afterwards. Anyway, we will inform via our channels when we migrate the data assessment from the survey tool to our permanent case study profiles. In the moment, we are using an electronic form. We also created an offline PDF version of this, which are recommended for collecting your data, as Christopher will show a little bit later, before entering in our JOT-form electronic form. The reason why we advise to use the PDF offline version is quite simply that you're not allowed to pause and resume with the JOT-form digital online form as soon as you shut off your computer. So everything which got entered gets lost. That's a little bit a pity. So that's why we recommend to just transfer your data you collect first into the digital form. When you have all the data ready, it is a quite straightforward data entrance, not requiring more than 15 minutes. We are still not asking for very detailed information, just for this information which allows a comparison of the different systems. As mentioned before, from October 2020 on, you can edit your data you recently or during the first sprint entered in the online form on a case study profile, so you're free to expand, reduce, or delete your datasets. If you are a participant of the cost action or you're a supporter of the initiative, without being the owner of the datasets and case studies we're looking at, we recommend you that to identify suitable case studies in your countries, contact the operators and owners, support the fact-finding mission through direct consultation. So we strongly recommend interviews with the operators to jointly fill out the online form, and either the operator, the data owner, him or herself, or you are then very much welcome to transfer the data in the digital survey form. Please note there's one important thing that in order to identify the data owner or enable the user profiles later on when we have the web portal ready, we strongly advise you that you identify a data owner, a data maintainer of the related case study and enter the contact details in the survey, because this person will receive the login details for the case study profiles at our web portal later on. So of course you get technical support, as I mentioned before when I introduced the team. Christopher Schifflechner will be happy to help you for all questions related to direct geothermal energy use. Joao will help you with any questions related to low temperature heating, cooling networks. If you have any general requests also concerning data privacy or any other matters for support, you are invited to contact the Cost Action Office, as you can see here in the email address below. We also collected the country reports of the past World Geothermal Congress and the past European Geothermal Congress. There's a collection of all these country reports if you would like to get support by identifying interesting case studies from your country. So you see this is the download link. You don't need to write it down now because all participants of today will receive the presentation, so you have the direct access link there. And inside our cost action, we also have a group, so-called country representatives, who are a kind of an interlink between the cost action and national stakeholders. And we are also happy to give you contact to our country representatives in case you would like to receive any support in participating at this initiative. An important note about our data privacy rules. So we have to distinguish between two levels of publicity. First of all, the before mentioned public accessible web-based GIS tool with short fact sheets linked to it. So as I mentioned before, the no sensitive data are shown as specific values, only as ranges, so that you can ensure that it don't violate your interest, your economic interest. We will do plausibility and conformity checks of all data provided to us. So we have the contact persons and the person who filled out the survey, and we will, in case we have any doubts, we will contact you, or better saying, everybody who's was announced as a contact person will receive an email before the publishing of the data to confirm that the data are representative. We also look at the non-published data, as I mentioned before. So this is only on a voluntary point of view. You are not obliged to send to us any specific key values, but it would be quite helpful for us to better identify technological and other drivers for the use of geothermal energy in heating cooling networks. I gave before the example of capacities, for instance, annual gross heat production rates, and so on. We will not explicitly publish this data. We will use them only for statistical purposes. And in case we would like to pick out an example, it would be anonymized, or if not, we would ask for your prior consent before publishing anything. And we're doing this based on the contact person who was filling out the survey. From October or autumn this year on, I mentioned before that there will be this case study profile. So you, as a data provider, will have full access. You will also have the possibility to delete your data. If you would like to withdraw your data from the survey anytime before autumn this year, you just contact the Action Office and we will do this for you. That's all from the introduction point of view, and I would like to go now to the more practical part of this web briefing, and I would like to invite my colleague Christopher to take over and introduce our group to the online form.
Yeah, so thanks, Gregor, for introducing me, and welcome from my side to everybody. So I'm Christopher. I'm a PhD student at the Technical University of Munich, and together with Gregor and Joao, I'm part of the core team of this 100 Good Reasons initiative. So the next about 20 minutes, what I will do is I will want to give you a first impression about the online survey and how to fill it out and what might be the best procedure for doing that. And so before going to the survey directly, just want to recatch what Gregor has already shown shortly. And this is the question, what will be the output? And so Gregor has already shown that we will establish a GIS tool showing then the geographic location of each of the case studies in our portal. And then each of these case studies will have a short fact sheet about the project. So probably between 2 and 3 pages, where then the main features, the main characteristics of this plant are shown and described for the public. And so the survey is mainly there, of course, also for collecting data for our internal evaluation, but most of the questions are then more about the fact sheet so that we have some profound data available so that people, if they are going through the GIS tool, they can look then also at the fact sheets and get a first impression about the geothermal projects by itself. So, and here you see, for example, a very first design of the potential fact sheet, but of course, then in the end, in a few months, it'll look a little bit more professional than it's now. And so the scope for the next 15 to 20 minutes is that I want to give you a first overview on the survey and provide you also with some first guidelines about the survey. So maybe how to answer some questions and how to tackle the whole survey in general. Then at the end, we will have a short Q&A and discussion on the survey, because maybe there are also some potential feedbacks from your side that you say, okay, this question there, we should add more additional information in order that it's clear to the user or something like that. And so before I will go to the survey by itself, I want to give some general suggestions about how to fill out the survey. So because as you will see, the survey itself will take you only 15 to 20 minutes max, maybe even less minutes, but only if you have all necessary data at hand. And so before filling out the survey, one of the main tasks will be collecting the data and writing also the short required descriptions about the project upfront. And so in order to be aware of what kind of data are requested or asked from our side, of course, you need to have a first look at the whole survey. But the online survey is in a way that it's about 5 pages. And so some of the questions are mandatory. So therefore, in order that you can enter the second or third page of the survey, you need to fill out the informations on the page before. And unfortunately, due to some technical issues, as Gregor has already mentioned, you cannot save the survey, let's say, for several days. So once you shut down your browser and re-enter the link of the survey, all of your information which you might have entered will be gone. So therefore, like filling out the survey and submitting it should be one step. And therefore, in order that you can still properly prepare all the data you need up front, there's also one offline version of the survey, which I will show in about 1 minute, where you see already up front all the potential questions that are asked by the survey, so that you can already prepare all the information. And once you have this, then filling out the survey itself is quite an easy procedure. And so before we are looking at the PDF, so the offline version of the survey, it's just important that you need to be aware that the offline version includes all potential questions which are part of the survey. But since the online survey is more intuitive or more flexible, it will adapt the questions based on your described project. So for example, if you have a sole heating project, so only that the geothermal energy is, for example, providing a district heating network, and you are specifying this on the second page of the survey, then the survey will not ask you anything about, for example, cooling, because you have already specified that your project is not providing cooling. But the PDF about the survey in general, they includes all potential questions. So therefore, you need to be aware. Okay, it's quite obvious that, for example, you don't have cooling, you're not able to answer the questions about cooling. So don't get confused about this fact if you're looking then at the offline version of the survey. So because this will now be the next step, just very shortly. So the link, which will be then also sent to you after this meeting, and which is also part of the presentation, there you can download the PDF of the survey. And so it's more or less all the same information and questions as the online survey. And so by looking at this PDF, you have already the possibility to check all the informations we would like to ask you. And depending on, for example, how you're collecting the data, it would be also maybe possible if you're meeting then with a plant operator and you discuss these data, you then just fill in this PDF. And of course, for our side, would be a little bit more favorable if you would still be able to submit it then on the online survey, because then we have the data in a more elaborated way. But it would be also fine if you just fill out the PDF here and then send it to us via email. So then you wouldn't need to fill out the JOT form survey again, but still we would like to encourage you to do this. And so, as I said, some of the questions will be not relevant for you because, for example, here you see there's a question about the status of your case study, and then you can select if it's already operating or, for example, it's under construction. And now you see here on the next page, there's 3 potential questions like, okay, what was the year of operation start? Or what is the planned year of operational start? And of course, if you then later on in the online survey, if you select that you have a commercially operating plant, you will not see the question about the planned year of operational start, and vice versa. If you say your plant is under construction, then you will be only asked about the planned year of operation. So therefore, don't get confused about the offline version that maybe some of the questions cannot be answered for your specific use case. Okay, and then so now the next 10 to 15 minutes will be about guiding you a little bit through the survey, showing you the main questions we like to ask you, and also showing how the survey works. And we hope that it's quite user-friendly. I mean, of course, at the beginning, there's just a short wrap-up text about the initiative, what are the goals, and so on. I mean, for you here who's attending today, Krieger has already explained it, but of course, if the link is then sent to potential operator who doesn't know about the initiative, more or less he or she will find all necessary information about the initiative here on this side. And then the first page is asking for very few information. This is only now about the contact details of the person who's filling out the survey. So, and this is maybe not a person from the company itself, but could be, for example, the country representative of for a country. So therefore, you don't need to be like employed at the company who's operating the geothermal project to fill out the survey. But of course, in best case, you might have had a short meeting with them, asking them for the information and so on. And so like the name of the person and the contact details who are filled in here on the first page, they are really only for us for internal use, that we can see, okay, who was filling out the survey. So therefore, in case that we might want to double check an answer, or we might have a small question about a certain detail, that we know who we can reach out to. So, but this data here about the person and email address will not be shown anywhere on the fact sheet or so. So this is only for internal purpose, as it's stated here. And so once you have filled out this information here, then you're changing to the second page, and now it's about a little bit collecting the main information about the site and the use case you want to present to the 100 Good Reasons initiative. And so you see, of course, at the beginning you will be asked for the site name, and so now for the next minutes I'm just typing in random information for hypothetical use case. But of course, then for the site name and address later on, if possible, you should be able to fill out a specific name and address for the plant, and especially about the site name. It would be also great if you could check, for example, how is this plant, geothermal project or plant already named in existing publications. So for example, in the country report of your, which are published at the World Geothermal Congress or European Geothermal Congress, maybe you see already, okay, there's the plant is written in this way, in this style. Then would be great if you could try to align it to the already established name of this geothermal site. In case that you don't find this such information, you can just type in the common name, how this plant or site is called, at your local site. And so, of course, then you need the address for your plant. And then what would be an additional feature is that you could also specify, for example, the exact location of the plant. So, I mean, maybe already the address is already, if you type it in on Google Maps, you come out already at the geothermal site, but sometimes, especially if the plant is realized in a very rural area with very few streets and everything, it might be that just the street name by itself is not that useful to find the plant exactly. So therefore, you could also put in an exact location. And for example, for plant project where you say, okay, the city is planning to install a geothermal site there, but they don't know where it will take place, then you could also just select the city center or one site which you might think there it could be that. But then, of course, for a plant project, it's not like that we think then the plant will be realized for 100% exactly there. Then it's just an indication about the potential location. And so then the next question is about the status of the case study. And as said before, here you will see now that depending on what you select, you will get different follow-up questions. So if you say, okay, it's a planned project or it's under construction, then you will be asked to estimate the year when it might start operating. But of course, if it's already in operation, then it's asked asking for the year of operational start. And as an additional question, we would like also to know if there was maybe a major adaptation during the last year. So maybe there was a third drilling realized because the heating demand was growing. So yeah, this would be, of course, also interesting to know. And what you see now here also is that some questions have like this small red star on the right side. And so this means that these questions are mandatory. So you will not be able to proceed then on the next side of the survey because it will tell you, okay, there are some errors here because the survey is currently missing information. And so therefore you see, like if you have a commercially operating plant, of course, there was a certain year of operational start. So therefore this question is mandatory, but year of last adaptation is of course not mandatory because some of the projects didn't have any major expansions or so on since the operational start. So here would be then an additional feature where you could also name the companies who, for example, who are owning, operating the plant, or who were also involved in the building or drilling of the plant. So this is completely voluntary and would be only a possibility to showcase the names of these companies on the fact sheet, also mainly for promotion reasons. So, but from a scientific point of view, that's not that relevant for us. And then here now, second time, we ask for an email contact to the case study. And this is what already Gregor has explained shortly before, that there we would like to have maybe one email address to the company, or maybe a specific person at the company with whom you might have the interview for collecting the data, that we also then add the email address of this person here, because then later on this person would get like the access link to the case study profile. So then also that the company by itself could, for example, adapt the numbers or also erase them easily if they don't want to participate in the initiative anymore. So therefore, that would be great if we could get one email contact from the case study operator. And then also for the fact sheet, we would like to ask you about a short description of the site. So therefore describing maybe in 150 to 200 words shortly, what is the site doing? What is kind of the main characteristics, main features? So everything which you think might be interesting for the reader. So it's not about explaining what geothermal energy is by itself. So you don't need to write, okay, geothermal energy means we are producing hot water from the ground, but then more like, okay, the plant here, it has a maybe they have drilled about 3 kilometers depths, and now they have established during the last years a district heating network, which is providing heat to local schools, a hospital, and also so many buildings. And then maybe you have some additional local features which might be interesting to the reader. And also for the fact sheet, it would be really great if we could get a picture of the site or so, so that we have some kind of a visual element for the first page of the website. And so therefore it would be great if you could maybe then also ask the company again if you would get one picture which we could use then also for the fact sheets. But an alternative would be also, for example, if it's a planned project where nothing has already been under construction or so on, then maybe also just a nice picture of the city where the project is planned or so could be also help us just to make the fact sheet a little bit more appealing. But what is also really important for us, in case that you upload a picture, then it needs to be sure that you are allowed to publish this picture. So, and also provide us with the picture credits, because otherwise, if we then later on put the pictures on the website of the initiative, and we don't have the rights to show the pictures there, it would mean that there's just a certain financial risk for the initiative, in case that then the right owner of the picture says, yeah, you're using it without having my permission. So therefore, in case that you are not sure if you can use the picture or you don't find anything which is free to use, it's also fine. So because of course we would be very happy if we get a lot of full pictures, for one for each project, but only if they are not causing any future problems for us. And then now the next questions are mainly about the main characteristics of the geothermal project. So here you see that you are asked about, yeah, what is the type of the project? So what is it doing? Is it just a heating network? Is it a cooling network? Is it combining both heating and cooling in one network? Is it, for example, case for some of this new 5th generation projects, or is it also having, for example, combined heat and power generation in case of very high brine temperature? And yeah, in case that we have missed something, for example, that you have a very specific case just for thermal energy storage and so on, you can also specify it here. And you see also, like, of course, there would be more than one possible selection. So in case that you might have two separated heating and cooling networks, you then can select both of them. And as I said before, so like depending on what you select here, it will also influence the questions later on in the survey. So because if you now select here, it's just a heating network, then of course you will not get any questions about the operational hours for your cooling network because you don't have a cooling network. And of course, we also then would like to know what kind of geothermal technology is involved in the project. So is it more like a deep geothermal? Is it medium or shallow ambient geothermal? And we are really aware that the definition of such questions, the same applies later to the generations of the district heating networks. Yeah, you could argue forever about what is really the distinction between shallow, medium, and deep geothermal energy. And we also had these discussions a lot within the cost action. And so within the cost action, we agreed to one certain definition or plot who's showing a little bit the different generations of the networks and also how we see the different source types like deep, medium, and shallow. But we are also, of course, aware that, yeah, there is no right or wrong definition, but just in order to have a kind of consistent way within the survey, we would like to ask you to follow the definitions shown here, even if maybe you don't completely agree with how we define deep, medium, and shallow geothermal here. And then it's also for us interesting to know if your site uses also heat pumps for the supply or for heating. And if it has a heat pump, then we would like to know if it's one large heat pump, which then is providing the heat to the network, or if you have a network like more 5th generation, where then there are decentralized heat pumps at the client's houses. And yeah, as I said, the generation of the network would be interesting for us. And then also, yeah, would be great to have a rough estimation about the number of clients supplied by the installation. And so here you see then like that you have certain ranges to select. And later you would also have the possibility to answer this question more precisely. So, but this would be then, like Gregor has already explained, such numbers would be only then for internal use. Like on the fact sheet, we would only display the ranges here. So therefore, for all questions, like especially in the 4th side of the survey, you will see that we first asking about a certain range and then about a certain a more specific number for this question, but these numbers are really only for internal use and are completely voluntary. So apparently I've missed one. Yeah, so then I missed to write an email address and also a short text for the description. And yeah, as I said here about the description, we created you might write about 150 words about the main features of the plant and the project. And yeah, so now we are on the third page, and the third page is only quite short. And there we are asking about the geothermal heat sources which are used. And so you see, you could fill in several heat sources, but in the end, I think for most projects, it will be only one heat source. But of course, there are also some larger projects which might have several geothermal projects integrated into one district heating network. Therefore, there's the possibility that you can fill in several sources. And there you see, like with, you can select then different categories about sources, like that you have shallow geothermal, then we would also like to ask you if you have groundwater, so an open loop, or if you have a closed loop. And then, also about for the deep and medium geothermal, we would like to ask you to specify the source. And then would also like to know the ranges about the depths and the temperature for the plant, and also about, again, for the purpose. So for example, if it's just heat extraction, if it's or for shallow geothermal, it might be also that it would be just for cooling, or you could also have a medium reservoir for thermal energy storage. So, but in the end, probably most of them will be for heat extraction as a purpose. And so here you see we ask you for certain ranges. And then again, for internal use, we would, of course, like to know the ranges in more detail. And then this is voluntary to fill in, but the selection here above is mandatory. So, and then the fourth page is asking a lot about the numbers about the project, so that we can see a little bit what is the capacity, what is the amount of produced heat or cooling, and also what is the operational characteristics. And so therefore, since we have selected heating as a sole purpose on the second page, you don't see now any questions about cooling. And so, but since it's an operating project for heating, now some of the questions are kind of mandatory, because there is a certain capacity, of course, of an existing geothermal heating network. Therefore, we would like to know the range, for example, about the installed heating capacity. And again, you can also, if you want, specify the heating capacity in a more specific way below this question. And as a starting point, we would also like to know what is the role of the geothermal energy in general in this network. So is geothermal energy the only heat source, or do you also have, for example, other heat sources integrated in the network, like biomass or also fossil fuels? So therefore, this would be interesting to see what role is the geothermal energy playing in the district heating network. And then, of course, it's also about for example, the share of the geothermal energy on the maximum heating capacity, and also the average annual operating hours. And so this is not asking for the full load hours of your plant or project, but about the operating hours. And so I think, especially for the classic district heating networks, most of them will operate nearly the whole year, but we also know of for some projects where during the summer months there's so less heat demand that they are shutting down the geothermal plant for some months. So therefore, then the operating hours would be, of course, lower. And so you see, like here, we are asking mainly about the geothermal side by itself. So really, what is the capacity of the geothermal plant? And so then the next question is about the network by itself, because you also want to see what is the share of the geothermal energy in the annual heat production. So is really geothermal energy providing the majority of the annual heat demand, or is it maybe playing only a kind of minor role because it's supplying a certain base load, but then the rest, the majority, are supplied by other sources. And so therefore, we would like to know what is the heat production of the network by itself. And this is then, of course, also related to the question, yeah, what is the share of the geothermal energy in this on the annual heat production? And then some of the final questions would be like, what is the energy conversion factor? So this is then describing the ratio of the useful heat or cold compared to the required electricity input, because this is also highlighting, especially for deep geothermal energy, the high efficiency which you can achieve. So because, for example, a plant can provide 15 megawatts of thermal load to the district heating network and only requires, for example, 1 megawatt of electrical power for pumping and re-injecting the water. And so this means like, okay, we have 15 megawatts thermal as a useful output of the plant and 1 megawatt required electrical input. So therefore, the energy conversion factor would be 15. But then, of course, for more shallow systems, the energy conversion factor will go down because then you need more heat provided by heat pumps, and therefore the heat pumps need a certain amount of electricity. But still, for us, would be interesting to see what is the estimated energy conversion factor of the different projects. And then, yeah, also about understanding the grid, the district heating network in a better way, it would be interesting to see what is the heat source used for applying also the peak load during the winter months, because it can be that the geothermal source is big enough that it also geothermal is providing the peak load, but other projects might also have a gas boiler or biomass boiler for providing the peak load. And yeah, the last two questions would be about if the installation has a backup system. If yes, would be also interesting to see what is the type of backup system. In case it's no, you don't need to answer that. It could be also that you just don't know if the plant has a certain backup system. The same is about the share of the fossil fuels on the annual heat production. So therefore, of course, would be interesting for us to get an estimation about this, but in case that you or the plant operator doesn't know the share or the operator doesn't want to look it up, can just select, I don't know. And so once you have answered all the questions on the fourth page, you're nearly done. But then what would be also quite interesting also for the fact sheet would be then again here that you could describe shortly the highlights of your geothermal energy system. So really think about maybe one or two aspects which might it quite special. For example, that next to district heating, you're supplying also a very large greenhouse for local food production or something like that, where you say, okay, this is something which makes my project special compared to the other 350 existing geothermal projects in Europe. But of course, it would be also interesting to see what were or what are the biggest challenges and obstacles concerning the implementation of the geothermal project, or maybe also operating. So, I mean, in the past, it could be, okay, the gas price is so low, we're just not compatible from an economic perspective, or it could be also like it was difficult to collect fundings for the project, or maybe from the legal and permit perspective, there were some obstacles. Therefore, it would be great to see if there are certain challenges which are applying to nearly all geothermal projects in Europe, or if we can also see, okay, in some countries, there are more obstacles from the legal perspective compared to other regions in Europe. So therefore, we would like to ask you also for the last question about the challenges and obstacles. And so, yeah, once this is filled in, you can just then submit the survey, and then you get a confirmation that the survey has been successfully submitted. And so, yeah, from my side, this hopefully was a very short but still helpful introduction to the survey. And yeah, now like we would be in the interactive Q&A session. And yeah, of course, we'll be glad to know if you have any specific questions or suggestions about the survey you've just seen the last minutes.
Thank you, Christopher. For a very nice presentation, we are now heading into the question and answer round. And I would like to invite you to either use your microphone or the chat function in case you have any specific questions on the initiative or how to fill out the survey. Maybe in the meantime, one important note, as you might already have been observed, everything is in English language. So in the moment, this initiative is only in English. We will identify options to make the tool available multilingual. We cannot confirm it yet, but we are hoping that on the long term there will be kind of an automatic translation function, at least for the for the survey questions and later on for the case study fact sheets, so that the outcomes of this initiative are also accessible for stakeholders not so familiar with English language. So I invite you once again, if you have any specific question, please use your microphone or the chat function.
Hi, Gregor.
Hi.
I have one question. In Lithuania, we have one system. It's Klaipėda geothermal plant, but it's still without official owner. So what we can do in this case? Should we wait for a new owner?
No, you could also enter it as a planned system, and you can put it as a challenge that you are currently lacking of an owner. That's the challenge in the end. The only thing which is important is that we need somebody who's a kind of a contact person. So later on, maybe the situation changes next year. You have an operator, but until then, if we, in case we include it in our tool, we need somebody who we can contact and we can provide the access to the case study profile.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Welcome.
And maybe one short comment from my side about planned projects in general, because I was showing now the questions you get if you select that you have an operating system. In case if you have a planned project, of course, you would still like to know what might be the estimated capacity of the geothermal site, and maybe what might be the operating hours. But there you would then also have the option like, I don't know, or not applicable. So in case that some of these numbers, you don't really have a clear picture without knowing who might be the owner. So therefore, you could also easily fill out the survey for a planned project without knowing too many details. But of course, it would help us if you would still could indicate, yeah, this plant might have 5 megawatts or 25 megawatts of thermal capacity, because then we could still characterize it and have a better idea about the characteristics of the potential plant.
Thank you, Christopher. Any further questions?
Yes. Hi all. My name is Rezade from Spain, and I guess you tell at the beginning, but I didn't remember who will have access finally to this data.
Yes. You mean to control the data or to view the data?
No, to view the data, the GIS.
Yes. So the idea is, as Christopher shown, we have this public part, which is leading into a GIS tool, where we will collect these ranges to specify the different types of geothermal energy systems and heating cooling networks. It will be visible in a GIS tool, which is more or less until 2024 hosted in the website of our cost action, Geothermal DHC. We are looking forward that somebody else will pick up this initiative once the cost action terminated. So I'm looking forward that probably ECHEC could be the host of such a system, it would be logical to have and it would be accessible, of course, for anybody who knows the website, who gets informed about it. But in the end, of course, you control the data you show, because it's ranges. Not all the questions are mandatory. We know that it's very sensitive. It might be sensitive. If you identify a question which is very sensitive from your point of view, but it's asked as a mandatory question, you can always get into contact with our team. We will discuss it and we adapt the form so that you are not have any conflict. But the aim is just to explain the different technologies, to show the spectrum of options which are available. It's not about to distribute sensitive information.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Any further questions? Once again, sorry, I will also show to you once again the contact on my screen. Or Christopher, can you show again the team contact slide if it's ready?
1 second. Yeah.
Here we go. Exactly. So all of you will receive the presentation of today. Also the accessing to the recording once it's stored. And you are still very much invited to directly contact either Christopher Joao for technical questions, for content-related questions, or the Action Office, especially when you have doubts about the data privacy, and we are happy to take care about your requests. So if there are no further questions for the moment, I would like to thank you for attending this web briefing, and we will stop the recording now. And I would like to wish you a nice afternoon and hope that you are interested to join